Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Our webinar topic today is unlocking time for the upcoming school year, and Kelly and I are excited to join you and talk about how you can make better use of your time next year. So hopefully you're not spending your nights and weekends tackling a to-do list. I'm coming to you from Dallas, Texas. I'm Courtney Flanders, and you can reach me after this webinar or at any time at courtney@elements.com. It is super hot in Texas today, as it is in many places across the country, but we're hitting like 110 degrees. So I hope that you're joining from someplace cooler, and feel free to add to the chat where you're joining us from.
I'm Kelly Freeheight. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. I can't say we're as hot as it is where Courtney is right now, but grateful to be in the space today and really eager to dive into the content today. I know that as Courtney and I were designing the experience, we felt like it was something that was even helpful for us as we were reflecting how we're leveraging time. So as we get started, go ahead. As we get started today, we're going to do a quick check-in. The check-in for today's conversation is we would love to hear what is one task or activity in your life where you predict the time it takes to complete it. So this is a little bit deeper today, but curious for you to reflect on a task or activity. Would love if you could share it in the chat. And as Courtney said, also share where you're coming from.
And it looks like for some of you, the chat's not working, so we'll get that fixed. We've got Leslie from the EE marketing team working on that right now. Kelly, is there an element in your life that you can predict exactly how long it's going to take you to do it?
Yeah, that would be showering. So I was on the phone with a teammate today and I said, Natalie, I need to get off the line. I have 15 minutes and I need to shower. So I time myself in showering. What about you, Courtney?
I'm very similar. I time myself in putting my makeup on and like my morning routine. So like 7 or 8 minutes is officially all I need. It looks like the chat should be live for folks.
Oh, that's a good one going running.
Yeah. Yeah, Jen, that's pretty short for me.
Meditation.
Rewind.
Dr. Kennedy's workout. That's what I need to do.
Yes, same. Well, many things in our lives are hard to predict. And so with that in mind, today we're going to be thinking about some of those things that are hard to predict, about how much time they're going to take and how we can be more efficient with them. Now that the chat's up and running, feel free to add either your check-in and also maybe where you're from. We'd love to know. Today, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to think about the costs of how our time gets used as school and district leaders and what that means both for us, but also for our teams. We're going to expand knowledge on ways to better use our time, and we'll practice 3 key strategies: having tactical meetings, managing roles, and thinking about job-embedded micro-professional development. And we'll close out by asking you to commit to something that you want to try and share with your extended school team. We also hope that today you think about things being safe enough to try. If something that Kelly and I suggest is different than how your team typically operates, we ask that you be willing to consider those new ideas. Unfortunately, we can't have the video on, but keep that chat going and lively. We'd love to know what you're thinking. And then we'll try and just make sure, thanks for joining us over the summer. We'll try and bring the good tunes, the good vibes, and really be thinking about a bias toward action. How can we be action oriented? So that next year's even better than the last.
As we get started in our conversations today, if you are district partners with us or have joined us on other experiences or new to us, we just wanted to share the process we're going to walk through in today's conversation. We also think it's a really great way for other adult learning experiences you're putting together as we kick off the new school year. So we'll start with the spark, which is going to allow us to feel really inspired and interested in the topic we're going to talk about today, have a chance to expand our knowledge, and then have a chance to practice and actually think about how we might apply this to our current situation and our teams that we get to serve each day.
So, with that in mind, there are three key elements to thinking about time management skills: awareness, being really realistic about the time that we're spending on something, knowing that time is a limited resource; arrangement or rearrangement, thinking about how you can organize your time, your goals, your plans, your schedules, and your tasks to be most effective; and then making adaptations. How can we monitor our time while we're performing activities, including adjusting to interruptions and changing priorities? As school leaders, some of the things that we block out time for, we recognize need to take more or less of our time based on how our priorities are shifting throughout the year or even throughout the day. And so we're going to keep these three things, these three A's in mind as we go through the session.
As we think about the time management one, which is really around the awareness, we want to think about a few things. And I know, Courtney, you and I have had some reflections on this in terms of how we think about our peak performance. So as we think about this, these are four things that we wanted to just encourage you to think about. So one, thinking about when do you perform the best, and also thinking about your team. So I know there's typically a time of day for me where my performance is the highest compared to if you were to talk to me at 5 p.m. or 4 p.m., you might not get the best Kelly. And then also thinking about time as treating it like money. So I know that we are all very gracious in giving our time to others, but we also need to be cautious of how that is impacting us and how we then show up for our teammates in other spaces. And then the third is really thinking about record how long it takes you to do a task. So this has been a practice that has been really helpful as you think about reflecting on, I did this task for the first time. Is it something that I'm going to have to do again? And if so, how long did it take? And maybe why did it take that long? And then really thinking about that futuristic time and perspective of how you might encourage yourself to do it faster, or think about maybe other people that could be involved in the process that might speed it up or give them a growth opportunity within.
So we want you to take about a minute and think about what's on your plate right now. If you were to draw out how you use your time, thinking about a pie chart, 100% of your time at work, what percentage is spent on each activity? Maybe you have a portion that's spent on planning professional learning, a portion that's spent on student affairs. Maybe as a district leader, you've got time spent in meetings. Feel free to take any kind of scrap paper that you have, draw a circle, and draw out what's on your plate currently. How are you spending your time? All right, these can be some rough estimates, but we'd love if you could add to the chat, what's the biggest thing on your plate? How are you spending the majority of your time? Kelly, I know you drew a pie chart. What's the big thing on your plate?
I'm laughing because like the 5% is eating, and I have my plate right here because I'm clearly not doing a lot of that while working. I would say majority of my time is spent in meetings and then creation of deliverables and finding relationships. So my three categories would be relationships, eating, and meetings. Kind of rhymes, right?
Yeah, it does. I'm envious of whoever's time this is, that they are only spending 10% in meetings. It looks like in the chat, some of you're spending most of your time at work. Are there specific activities at work that you're spending time on? Uh, Ruth says,
Observations. That feels good.
yeah, definitely. That's a great thing to be prioritizing. Jen's doing a lot of planning and organizing that to-do list. Let's see. As you reflect on what you drew, we've got just a couple of questions for you to think about.
And a few of those are really want you to think about how you're using time based on your goals as a leader. And then Courtney, would you take the other two?
Yeah. Um, does how you're spending your time really focus on what your goals are and what your strategic priorities are? How are you currently tracking how you spend your time? If it took you a minute to think about this and you had to really ask yourself, what am I spending my time doing? Do you have a good system for keeping that in check? And then, are you like Kelly? Is only 5% of your whole pie something that balances both your work and your personal life? Do you find yourself taking those things off of your plate a little bit too frequently? Um, yeah, looks like a lot of planning, some family. We want you to think through these things because as you start the next school year, we're hoping that you can find both a balance in how you're spending your time, but also that your time is really spent on those things that are going to move your school or district forward. So that as you reflect on the year, you can see how your time aligns to your strategic goals and vision.
As we think about this part, want to give you an opportunity to think about what this could look like, in particular, really about the cost that it can have on it. And one thing we wanted to share with you all is the Harvard Business Review put out this article a few years ago. And this actually gets to the point I was sharing earlier, really thinking about time as money. And then really thinking about how you're leveraging the time and then and using that as a reflective tool with your teams. So Courtney placed it in the chat. So if you're curious as we engage in this, we want to just give you a moment to have a chance to see how much time you're spending within meetings, or if you're lucky enough to have that time to really get, as you're like Ruth, get into observations. Curious to see what that looks like.
And I think some of you might still be having a tough time accessing the links that we're putting in the chat. We're working on getting that adjusted. If you can't do that, know that we're going to send it out to you afterwards along with the slides. Every time we've used this calculator, what we found about meetings is that they cost a lot of money. So one of the things that you'd see in here is if you have a standard meeting and you put in your different attendees' salaries, for a lot of, for an example, this is going to show you how much a meeting would cost to pull all of those people together based on what their salaries are. So if you think about a team meeting where you pull in your leadership team every week and you spend a full hour meeting, the cost of that usually starts at about $1,000. People spend 2 full days every week, typically in meetings, which means that the time to get things done on their to-do list often feels really limited. And in general, what researchers have found is that for every 30 minutes of meetings, people are off task. They send 1 to 3 emails during that time. Maybe you can relate to this, but definitely as a district leader, there are times where we feel like we've got endless meetings with endless discussion, and we're not necessarily moving the work forward.
As we get into the expand part, Courtney and I want to explore with you all, what are some tools or concepts you can use, not only for yourself, but also as you're coaching other individuals as they think about how they're leveraging time. So as we think about the arrangement piece, wanted to just share a few things that have been helpful as we've worked with our district partners and just our internal teams. Really thinking about how the time you're spending aligns to those professional goals. Along with that, thinking about the schedules and tasks that you have to use to get things done. This is a list of a few things, knowing that, acknowledging that it's not an exhaustive list, but wanted to just share a few that really have stuck out to Courtney and I as we were talking about this topic. One, really thinking about how do I avoid the whole idea of everything is urgent. I know that I woke up in the first 2 hours today, I thought everything was urgent, and it took until I started to prioritize my time to realize there were just a few things I needed to get done today. So how might you start to develop a list that allows you to feel a little bit more focused so you're walking into the day feeling like you can accomplish a few things. The other piece is just to think about protected time. So when is your best work time throughout the day, and how might you leverage that as your work time? I know for me, that's the morning time before my 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock meetings start. That might mean that I have to wake up a little bit earlier, but I also know that my performance is higher at that time of day. And that's typically when I put my protected time. And then I think the last thing I just wanted to highlight on this slide was trying to do half-size goals. So oftentimes I can be guilty of not going about a goal because it's too ambitious and I'm scared to even start it. So really thinking about what are 1 or 2 things I can do this week that will get me closer to that goal at the end of the 3 months or 6 months that I'm working towards it.
One idea you can try is by thinking about where does your work fall in these different buckets. So we're going to think about this like a traffic light. Your green light work is the work that you love doing. You're great at it. You are uniquely qualified to do it. This is why the organization hired you. That's how I personally felt when I was a school leader about planning professional development. I love doing it. I could get lost in that work, and I'm pretty efficient at it. Your yellow light work, you still really love doing it and you're great at it, but it's not necessarily why the organization hired you. This is something where you feel like while you're good at it, it's not necessarily in your job description, if you will. For me, those are like coaching conversations with students. Love doing it, great at it. Definitely something that's detracting from my ability as a school leader to kind of move through the rest of the day and keep the organization on track. Orange work, those are the things you tolerate. You're competent, you're somewhat qualified. If any of you are current principals, that maybe you deal with attendance for credit, that's how I feel. This is not what I'm good at. Organization, it's a struggle for me. It's okay. And then your red light work. This is stuff you really dislike it, and it's partially because you're not great at it. You're not competent at it. It's not why the organization hired you. And therefore, it takes you some time to do. And it can be hard to acknowledge what those things are. But for me, facilitating parent conferences really wasn't something I was great at. And it took too much of my time and energy to plan for. As you think about your time and how you spend your work, we want you to be mindful of where does your work fall? And am I being used for this too much, too little, all the time? And how might I really reflect on that? So, in thinking about if you're somebody who coaches others, what are the things that really you do a great job with? And what are the things that are detracting from your time? Maybe this lesson planning support, we're okay at it, but teachers are asking me to do it all the time, and it's something that we just tolerate. Or when it comes to textual training, this is red light work. You're not great at it. You don't necessarily know all the latest and greatest tips. It takes you a while to figure it out, but teachers are using you for it way too much. We'll give you a minute to reflect on what's your work and what are you spending time doing. If it's helpful, go back to that pie you drew at the beginning and start thinking about it in those buckets. Where do you have red, yellow, green, and orange light work? Kelly, anything come to mind as you were thinking about this activity?
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about as I was in a coaching role in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, the piece that I needed to prioritize, but oftentimes didn't, my green light was sharing best practices because I love to share what's happening within the classroom and what I'm seeing. The piece that was probably yellow for me was those coaching conversations. So oftentimes I got pulled in to be a sub for a teacher or to go model a lesson. And that didn't allow for me oftentimes to have those coaching conversations. So I wish that had been the green, and that is why they hired me, but I probably would put it at yellow, to be honest.
Yeah.
What about you, Courtney?
It's just making me think about how that red light work feels so draining. And, all of those things, if you're going through your work and you're saying, I have a lot of red lights, then potentially we're not leveraging our teams in the way that we could to make work more efficient. Because for somebody else, that might be a green and it might be much, much faster for them to get it done. So with that in mind, Kelly's going to bring us into our practice. And we're going to talk about what are 3 things that you can do to shift how you use your time.
So my hope is that this next section, I can share the first practice, which is tactical meetings. So excited to share this. I was actually in Tennessee yesterday with our teammate, and we were talking to them just around how to leverage tactical meetings. We all know that meetings are shared experiences. And so oftentimes we want those experiences to feel like a shared experience. What can happen is that meetings can feel passive. Just like Courtney shared a few minutes ago, People could be multitasking, or they could be thinking about what they have to do after work. Really, we want to shift the mindset of how do we make these more active meetings so that everyone is able to contribute and hopefully contribute those green light activities to the conversation. So our hope is you can walk away with one or two strategies of how this could happen. On the next slide, what we're going to see is the process that we leverage as we think about tactical meetings. But before we get into that, wanted to just share the types of meetings. I think one thing that has been incredibly impactful for our district partners that we've worked with is just naming the type of meeting that you're walking into. So there is something about that mindset shift. It's kind of like those that are working out, the days that you know you're doing some weightlifting versus maybe the cardio. Your body knows, or you know how to show up to the experience. So wanted to just highlight the 5 different meetings we leverage with our district partners. So the mentor is really that one-to-one or that small group coaching conversations that you have, which is really around the development and the learning that's happening within the organization. As we think about the sharing of information meetings, a lot of times in other organizations or district partners we work with, they call these status meetings, right? It's just a quick check-in, sharing of information, and oftentimes it's a way to just continue to move the work forward. And as we get to the tactical, that's really where you might bring some of those status, those sharing of information agenda items to a tactical meeting to gather some input, maybe seek advice or share a decision that you made from a prior conversation or meeting. And then strategic. These are my favorite meetings, but oftentimes have a high cognitive load. So when I schedule these type of meetings, I typically try to think about when is my peak performance during the day. So these, as I work with district partners, are oftentimes those leadership school meetings, data conversations, or more importantly, even your school improvement plans. So how does that connect to the overall district strategy, and what progress are we making towards our school improvement plan? And then governance. So I think about those times that Courtney, we both were in schools. To me, this might have been when we were changing policies around how we were leveraging subs in the building when there was a shortage, or bus policies, field trip conversations. These are typically things that allow us to guide work, but are things that are more governance. So these in our organization don't happen on a weekly basis. Typically, we see this happen more on like a quarterly, maybe even bi-monthly experience. Ultimately, our goal of every meeting is to create a shared experience and something that is able to allow everyone to bring their voice to the table. So with that, Courtney, do you want to share a little bit about how we might walk through a tactical meeting?
Yeah. If we think about tactical meetings, they have 5 main components. And this is something that you can use. Think about all of the times where your teams need to tackle an objective or get a task done, whether it's a PLC that needs to plan an upcoming unit, or a leadership team that needs to make a game plan for supporting all of your teachers. We'll look at the anatomy, and then we'll see an example of this in action. These tactical meetings are best when they start with a check-in. Just like Kelly and I asked you to reflect on what's something you can predict how much time it's going to take. This is a short question. It gives people the space to get present. And ideally, it's something where everyone speaks very briefly, whether it takes 30 seconds or a minute for everyone to check in. This is a practice that makes sure that as we kick off the meeting, everyone's voice is heard, so that it doesn't default to just whoever has the highest job title running the entire meeting and other people checking out. Next up is a checklist. This is just a visibility over our reoccurring actions, and each person responds with a check or no check. If you're thinking about a school leadership team, what this could look like, maybe some of your priorities as a school leadership team are that you do 3 observations a week, and that you check in with the students on your caseload. You would go through and either say, check, yes, I've done this, or no, check, I haven't. There's no discussion about it after that. It's just allowing for visibility and accountability for the team. The third part is a project update. So this is time to share anything that's changed since the last meeting, ask any clarifying questions, but again, it's pretty brief. And then next, you build your agenda. You build this on the fly in a shared space so that everyone's priorities can be added to the agenda. You're not wasting time before the meeting prepping for the meeting. And you have to, this is a key component, say how much time you need to discuss this. So you're asking people to really be strategic and think about what is it that they need from this agenda item? Is it an ask or something where they want to share information? And then finally, you process the agenda. You use a protocol to go through those agenda items efficiently with each agenda owner. And we end by checking out. It's helpful to see what this can look like in practice. And so as you watch, you're going to see how the facilitator goes through the agenda. And these are some of our colleagues leading this tactical meeting.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and check in. So if you can take a second and put your check-in card on our tactical meeting board, we'll go around the circle.
I said I was overcast with a light sprinkle. I just feel like I have a lot on my plate, a lot on my to-do list, and so I have this like looming overcast, but it's not storming, so I'm in a good place.
Katie.
I said partly sunny. I'm happy to be here, but I have a lot on my to-do list similar to Gabby's. So just in a good mood, but have a lot to do.
Cool. Thanks, Katie. Baltzar.
I have this like foggy morning with like a sunny forecast for the afternoon. I have a lot of action items to get through this morning, but I'm projecting a sunny afternoon, so I think it's gonna clear up.
Jill.
Sunny. I got a lot of my to-dos done before this meeting, so I'm feeling really good. And it's Friday, guys.
Megan.
I would say clear and calm. I had a really good start to the morning, so feel good.
Awesome. Thank you. I had a clear sunrise that I left the curtains open in my room and the sun came right in and it was really beautiful this morning, so I'm feeling good. Okay, so everybody has checked in. Did I miss anybody? Cool. We're gonna do our checklist items. So we're gonna respond check or no check to each of our checklist items, and the three things that we want to check in on today are: have we submitted our time tracking, have we submitted our expenses, and have you updated your calendar to reflect your current travel? Any questions? Gabby, kick us off.
I am no check, check, check.
Check, no check, no check.
No check, check, check.
And I am check, no check, check. So if you haven't done one of these items, make sure you do it before next week. Let's take a moment and read over the DI lineup. So remember, this is just updates, and if you have a question or something that you want to bring to the group, add that as an agenda item. Otherwise, just take a moment and read quietly. All right, show me with your fingers how much time you need. All right, we're about 30 seconds to wrap up your DI lineup items. Are you ready to come back? All right, cool. Okay, so we're gonna go through our agenda items. Let's make sure to add our names, time we think it's gonna take. So we'll do the quick ones first. Gabby, it looks like you have a 2-minute update. Looks like change for October retreat. What do you need?
So the proposal is that we would keep the week the same. We're not actually going to change that, but it would be less of a retreat. We'd have more unstructured time, so we could actually have work time, get things done, but we would still all come together. So I don't know if we can just go around and make sure that there are no objections to that. If there are objections, we can take that, but we'd love to move forward with this if there are none.
Okay, we're going to do objection, no objection on Gabby's proposal to change the retreat to a work week. So Katie, will you kick us off?
No objection.
Megan.
No objection.
No objection. I love this idea.
I don't have an objection, but I'm very curious what week in October, since a lot of us have already booked clients for those weeks.
Yes, Gabby, can you answer that?
I think it's the first full week. It's like October 2nd through 6th. So I think we have a calendar hold. If not, I'll make sure after the meeting you have a calendar hold.
Cool. So no objection, Jill?
No objection.
No objection from me. Great. Did you get what you needed, Gabby?
I did. Yeah, we'll go ahead and make the change.
Awesome. Thank you.
As we go into conversations, just wanted to point out a few things. One, wanted to just share, you probably saw as Courtney was sharing in the chat, the check-in was really something led by Dre as our facilitator. who is really supporting to move the work and the conversation forward. For many of our district partners, this might not be the person that has the highest positional power that's in the room leading that conversation. We actually would really advise that you think about someone else leading that conversation. We put in the slides a resource that you may leverage as part of that practice. I will say it takes practice, right? The first couple of times when we said objection, no objection, I think we were all like holding in giggles because we were like, are we at the courthouse? What's going on? But really what we found to be really impactful is it was a quick way for us to just get a sense of if people were on board, and then allowed us to create the space to really make sense of if that was moving forward. Courtney, I think the Dallas heat is taking over your computer right now. I don't see anything, but I'm going to share my screen and maybe I can help fix that problem. Let's see if this works.
Sorry, Kelly, thank you. If not, I can redo. As Kelly's fixing my technical difficulties, one thing you saw too is that just what she's projecting right here. People need to think about, am I requesting an action, requesting information, sharing information, or requesting advice? And this lets folks know how to engage in the meeting. And so if we need an action, that's typically pretty quick, right? We need people to do something, but it lets folks know, okay, this is something I need to add to my calendar. It is an action item. When we're requesting advice, that's where we want to have discussion. And so just knowing how you want people to engage. And then as you saw, Andrea went back to Gabby afterwards and said, Gabby, did you get what you needed? One of the pitfalls of meetings is that people can feel like we have endless meetings with endless discussions. By going back to that question and processing that request, we know whether or not we can take this off of the agenda for next time. We know if we got what we needed and we can move forward. So in thinking about what's another way that you can better use your time, we're going to go back to that idea of your orange light work and your red light work. And this comes from the book, The New School Rules, which is really how we think about responsive leadership. I feel like Kelly must have it right next to her on her desk.
I'm testing you, Courtney. I'm just kidding.
One of the rules in the book is to define the work before you define the people. So feel free to take a minute and just read through what's on the screen here, which comes from this. Sometimes our job descriptions become just like fallbacks and crutches and ways that we think about how we think through who does what role. And so oftentimes that means that we say, okay, well, based on someone's job description, this must be work that they're going to do. But if that work is orange light work or red light work and is taking them too much time, then we need to rethink how we allocate roles and responsibilities. So we're going to give an example that comes not from the education sector, but maybe you can relate. These are some of my former students and our colleague Jason. Jason's at the side. I'm like tucked in the back there. These are some of our former students, and yeah, thanks, Kelly. And every year, Jason and his partner graciously open up their home to host everybody who wants to come for a Thanksgiving meal as a way to reunite with former students who have now graduated. First couple of years of this were just a mess. And part of it was because of how they thought about doing the work. So Kelly, if you could hit the next, thanks. One thing that happened was Jason and Daniel weren't really clear about everything that would need to be done. And so if we're thinking about this in a more responsive way, we needed to first think through what are all the things that have to happen to make a Thanksgiving potluck a success. We need to clean the house. We need to make a menu. We need to get food. We need to make sure that kids come. We need to make sure that once they come, they feel welcome. All of these things kind of got overwhelmed and it wasn't clear who was doing what. And also as a guest, I wasn't sure like what role should I play in their home as also an adult who wants to be helpful. So then we started to think about what are those common items in our Thanksgiving potluck? Food at a potluck is always tricky, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
one year we had all of the meats and no sides. Another year we had all of the sides and no meat. By the third year, Jason had come to Education Elements and we figured out how we were going to address those problems, which is that someone needs to be in charge. So in a traditional setting, we might say that one person decides the menu, does the grocery shopping, and cooks. Another person sends out invites, makes sure people have the reminders, and that the guests would bring potluck items. But ultimately, what we found was that we'd run out of things and things wouldn't work to our plan. So, in trying to be responsive, we've rethought these roles. Daniel's job is the food guru. He has to make sure that a delicious menu is a reality. He can do this in lots of different ways. He can grocery shop, he can cook, he can get it catered, he can run to the store when we've run out of something. But ultimately, his job is to make sure that we have the right food there. And if we do run out of something, he knows that he's the one who's going to go pick it up instead of us all looking at each other, wondering what we were going to do with another mac and cheese.
We ran
When
into
you
this. Yeah, I was going to say, Courtney, I'm thinking about when we ran into this as a company. One thing we were trying to think about was how do we leverage our in-house expertise and also an opportunity for us all to grow. So in a traditional setting, we oftentimes were thinking this way prior to us reimagining how we might think about roles and accountabilities. At our organization, we have associate partners, senior consultants, a consultant. At first, we approached it this way, where it was like, okay, so the associate partner is going to decide the roles, the relationship with the clients. And then we realized quickly that this accountability was something that actually needed to be spread across, and it couldn't live with just one person. So when we were thinking specifically about what this could look like, we were working with Dallas ISD, and we really thought about what is one way that we might actually leverage the people within the organization beyond just our titles. So you'll notice that in this context, we leveraged a Jamboard to help us come up with those accountabilities. And through that experience, we realized that there was someone that we needed to serve as like the strategy overseer. That happened to be Courtney. And then we also needed those that were liaisons. So those that had relationships and also were working on different streams of work that could connect the work that they were doing specifically around blended learning to the other work they were doing with coaching and other streams of work. What you'll notice is some of the people served multiple accountabilities and others might have only served one. What this allowed our team to do was better think about the allocation of time and then also align it to each individual teammates' roles and accountabilities and goals that they had at Elements. Was this hard at first? Yes. Did it make the project a lot more enjoyable and the impact on the client? Absolutely. It was stronger. It allowed us more fluidity, especially as we were thinking about different seasons within the school year. Uh-oh, the Texas heat's taken over my computer now. I'm just kidding. Go for it, Courtney.
You fixed it much faster than me. Okay, so in doing this, unfortunately, we can't put you in breakout rooms to discuss, but we want you to think about what are some of those other duties as assigned that are everybody's job at your school or district and also no one's job. And therefore, they're not really getting done or you're rushing to do them. And those are the things that are taking up nights and weekends. Are there any accountabilities that are assigned to people based on their title, but not their skills or interests? So if you found yourself or some of the teammates that you support really struggling with the time management around something, is it because you've asked them to do work that's really not green light work for them? And is there somebody else who'd be better suited for that job? And then finally, just thinking about what next year is going to look like for you. How might you apply this practice of defining the work before you define the people to save both you and your teammates some time next year? We'll give you some time to reflect. And one thing we like to do this when we're kicking off like a smaller project, just as Kelly said, thinking about what are some mini goals within your work? How can you make a goal half size? And so if you're thinking about something even as simple as making sure that every teacher gets classroom observations, how can you think through who's going to do what and what part of the observations are people doing? Is there something someone could take off a plate in terms of scheduling? Maybe overseeing consultants or supervising lots of different students in different groups. How can you think about those roles and responsibilities differently? Yeah, I see some of them coming through in the chat.
Yeah, Nate shared just the responsibility of supervising the common areas, right? So thinking about how you might leverage your people differently might be something to consider. And then parent conferences. I know task one is getting parents there, right? Task two is how do we create an experience that's enjoyable, that they want to come back? And really thinking about the follow-up and what are those small moments that you create for parents. So great example, Nate. And then Jen just shared leveraging the idea of even over. Absolutely, Jen. You know, we love a good even over. So really thinking about the descriptions of jobs and accountabilities, even over your job title that you have on paper or what your contract says. So I encourage you all as we think about this to really think about what are portions of today's conversation you could take back to your team. We purposely created some slides that you literally could file, make a copy and add. So in this session, we might bring this into like a breakout experience or small group conversation and just allow your teams to be able to reflect. As Courtney said, this is a great experience to consider at the beginning of a project and also midway through. So as you start to host those reflective conversations, how might this change, let's say, come November? Maybe there's some of those shifts. I don't necessarily know, Nate, how well of a supervisor I would be in the common areas. So I think give me 3 months and then you can determine it. So give people those mini goals, right? Let's think about how this can add to what their goals are. And then how might you shift that as we go into different seasons? Courtney, you want to kick us off in sharing the last strategy for today's conversation?
Yeah. Our final thing we want to think about, we talked about how you can have tactical meetings that are more efficient, how you can rethink roles and accountabilities. And now we want to think about going back to those paper plates or those pies you do in the beginning. When does your team make time to learn and grow? And how long does that typically take? And how is your team moving forward in alignment? We've got to ask ourselves these questions because oftentimes when it comes to professional development in schools and districts, we get a lot of it over the summer right before we kick off school. And then occasionally we have a full day. Typically what we find in those is that towards the end of the day, people's energy is waning. It's no longer an efficient use of their time. We're not necessarily getting the most out of that time spent. There's too many gaps between when we start professional learning and how we keep it moving. And so we want to just suggest one way to think about that differently. And that's really focusing on learning that's applicable and creates a shared understanding with your team. So one thing we're really loving right now are the ideas of learning courses. These are virtual courses that folks can do asynchronously on their own time. And they're focused on being really micro and specific about a certain action. So the one you see on the screen comes from our course on leading learning and thinking through how do you engage the people that you lead and how do you share feedback with them. What you'll see over here on the left-hand side is that each session starts with a quick spark. It only takes a minute. And then people will spend about 10 minutes or so expanding knowledge before they get a task that they need to then practice and apply. This means that to learn something new really takes people 10 or 15 minutes of their day, and they spend the rest of the chunk really thinking about how they're going to practice and apply it, and then they get feedback. Why we love this is because when we think about how your team uses their time during the school year, we know that teams are more effective when you can speak a shared language. So if everyone on your team knows how to run a tactical meeting, making that shift is going to be much more efficient and quicker. If everyone on your team really knows how to give feedback to the teachers that they coach, they're going to be more efficient at it, and we're going to have less work in that red light bucket. Professional development shouldn't take a long time. Making sure that people can do these in small chunks and then really spend their time applying is something that we're focused on for next year, knowing that we want people to learn and grow.
As we think about the apply piece, really wanted to just continue to hone in on what Courtney said. What is one strategy you might want to bring or out of today's conversation? So I know something that just like hit home to me is, Kelly, how are you spending 10 minutes a day learning? Like, are you? And if not, why can you not do that, but instead choose to do other things? Or prioritize things that might not be adding value to your conversation. So would love for you to just take a moment to think about what is one thing you want to do coming out of today's session. If you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat, that way we can engage with you, that would be lovely. Yeah, thanks, Nate. I appreciate just your vulnerability of sharing how you want to leverage PLCs and just self-pacing for adults. Yeah, that's really ties really nicely to the work Courtney was just talking about. Yeah.
And Jen, I think talking with people about time and building that awareness really comes back to what we started with this spark, which is to adjust our time. We need to first know, how are we using it? And we love tactical meetings here. So yes, please share it. Please feel free to watch that video in full. All of that's coming to you with this recording.
Yeah, and I think one thing, Courtney, we would love to offer is just we're open to coming to conversations and helping you to build that skill set of the tactical. We also have organizations that we work with that are doing this work, and I know oftentimes would allow you to be a part of those conversations. So reach out to Courtney and I. We're happy to make those connections so that you can really see it in a live experience and maybe not just in a filmed EE experience with Baltazar and Andrea.
Absolutely. As we close out, we're going to give you a few minutes back. We want to make sure you have a couple of links and things that you can do. If, like Kelly, you really want to think about how you're building your team's toolkit with just 10 minutes a day, we encourage you, check out our learning courses. We're excited about them. And we are happy to talk more about that. So you can get to them by visiting this website at elements.com/learning courses. There are a couple there that we think would be a great value add for your team. And then finally, as Kelly mentioned, we've got our emails up here again on the screen. Today, we talked about what it costs us when we don't use time effectively, how we can better use time, and 3 key strategies for unlocking time for next year. If there's anything that we went over that you'd like for us to help with, as Kelly mentioned, we'd love to talk with your team about tactical meetings, help facilitate one. So seriously, reach out anytime because we would love to do that with you.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate the time.